Thanks all of you for coming. Most of you I know, some of you I don't. But anyway, I'm Justin Baker, Managing Director for Local MO. We're located down in Falls Church, and we focus on sustainability measures. So commissioning, retro commissioning, energy modeling, energy audits, things of that nature. So today we're going to talk about Local Law 97, and what I'd like to do is kind of quickly get some information about what it is to you guys, and then start to hopefully have just more of a conversation about how does this affect our clients and how does this affect kind of how we're going to be doing our design moving forward. This is a presentation we did for HOK, so there's a couple of things in there that aren't going to apply. All right, so what is Local Law 97? Local Law 97 is kind of the meat and potatoes of the Climate Mobilization Act. So that was passed back in April of this year. 7 different bills. One of them was Local Law 97. And the intent of Local Law 97 is that, New York City plays a big role. It's a huge city, a lot of buildings contributing lots of greenhouse gas. Roughly 70% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions are from commercial buildings. So the easiest way to tackle the problem of excess greenhouse gas is to tackle through commercial buildings and lowering the amount of greenhouse gases able to be permitted by commercial buildings. So just you can see, the U.S. makes up 15% of all carbon dioxide emissions, and buildings make up roughly 70% of New York City's emissions. So Local Law 97, what it's doing is it's going to set a cap on how much greenhouse gas can be emitted. The way they're measuring that is kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per square foot. You'll see there's going to be a chart in a minute. It's going to be in tons of carbon dioxide per square foot. But they're basically the same thing. And the thing to remember with this is because it can get kind of confusing. The greenhouse gases are carbon. Carbon is energy. It's all the same thing. So they're going to label it as we're going to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They're measuring it in kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. But what it comes down to is how you reduce it. You're going to reduce it by reducing your energy. Right now, they're not talking about embodied carbon at all when you're talking about construction. There's some other things, they're not really considering. They're going to look at it strictly as, and what does kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent even mean? It's the amount of carbon dioxide that is produced by producing that amount of energy that you're going to use. So there's different amounts of carbon dioxide that's going to be produced, whether you're talking about kilowatt hours from the electric grid, natural gas, fuel oils, any of that. The other thing to remember about this, we're primarily focused on New York City designs in this office, but there are some people working in other cities, primarily Dallas. So there are, when you look at the Energy Star, Dallas is actually ahead of New York when you're looking at how many Energy Star buildings. The first, you're going to see more buildings adopt this. This is the first program of this nature in the country. But the blueprint for this is give people benchmarking, get their data, and afterwards see what you want to do with that data. So there's about 20 cities in the country that have had mandatory benchmarking in effect. New York being one of them, Washington, D.C. being another. New York's, they passed this, it's going to go into effect in 2024. Washington, D.C.'s is going to go into effect in 2021. You'll see other cities are going to jump on top of this. So, other cities we may be doing some work in, but particularly Dallas, they already have they're cutting emissions by 33% from 1990 to 2020. But I think you'll see them involve something else, maybe not exactly the same, but similar to this.
Is everybody familiar with Local Law 84?
I think I have a slide up.
Okay.
So That's what local law 97 is. It's a law that's going to, based on the type of building you have, it's going to give you an amount of greenhouse gas you can emit. It's going to be in 3 phases as of right now. 2024 to 29 will be one set of requirements. 2030 to 35 will be another, and then after from 35 to 50 will be or from 2030 to 34, and then from 2030 to 50 will be a third. It's going to get more stringent each time. So how do we help our clients with this? Or if you were a client, how would you go through this? The first step is local law 84. So local law 84 is the benchmarking requirements. That's been in effect since 2011. It's went into effect in 2009. It started actually being required in 2011. They also put some modifications into it with local law 133 that changed it from 50,000 square feet being the threshold to now 25,000. What it is all you have to do is benchmark your building. You don't get a grade on it. You don't get any fines based on it. You just have to do it. It's due May 1st every year. And all benchmarking your building it's basically submitting what Energy Star's uses portfolio manager, the EPA runs it. It's just submitting through that, and it's just a list of your building kind of characteristics. So what type of building it is, the size, it looks at your plug load a little bit, and then you put all your utilities into it. And it basically gives you a score that is normalized for the type of building, the size, and the city, the weather you're in. And it's a way to compare your building against like buildings all across the country. You need to have a score. It goes from 1 to 100. If you're in the 1, that's basically saying you're in the 1% of the worst buildings energy-wise in the country. 100% you'd be in the top percent. 75% is what you need for Energy Star support. So this is kind of how it starts. But how we're going to be able to tell our clients where they currently stand is from this data. The problem with this data is that right now there's nothing tied to it, so anyone can submit it. A lot of buildings they're submitting it themselves, and because there's nothing tied to it, we've seen some results where the data is clearly wrong. That's the first thing we're going to push with our clients is to get us doing their local A84. We do it really cheap. If we can get in there and do it, we're going to have their data before anyone else does. We're going to know if they have a problem before anyone else does, and we're going to be able to kind of tell them, here's the issue you have, here's how we can fix it, before they even really realize that they have a problem. So the second step, once you have your data, figure out where do I currently stand. Because come January 1st, 2024, it starts mattering, it starts counting. So quicker you can figure out where you stand, the better. So from our local law 84 data, we can figure out how many kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent by looking at the different energy types that they use. So, and this is the chart that lays out what is permitted at this time. So these building occupancy types, R1 is a hotel, B is commercial building, this is healthcare. So all of them have a different building type, and here's how much tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per square foot you're allowed. So you can see for 2024, these numbers are all the same. They change at 30, and they'll change again at 35. So basically, you need to, like I said, convert the kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent and then compare and see if you're compliant or not compliant.
What that means right now is for any client that we have, if their building is over 25,000 feet in size, total square footage, they should have a benchmark number on file and should have been filing it since at least 2014, if not earlier.
Yeah.
And we can look at that, it's public information, it's online, and we should be able to compare that number to these numbers to see whether the building will be in compliance in 2024 and whether it will be in compliance in 2030. And we can then tell our client, you have no short-term problem, but long-term you do have a problem. You're going to have to reduce your carbon utilization or the emissions by 2030 or by 2024.
And how they came up with these numbers, again, is from the benchmarking they've been requiring. So the idea is that this period, this 2024 to 29, the worst 25% of greenhouse gas emitters are gonna be the ones who have to make adjustments. From 30 to 34, that's gonna be about the bottom 75%. We don't know the limits for 35 yet. They say they will have them out by January 1st, 2023. But I would anticipate that as buildings currently stand, it's probably somewhere in the 90 to 95% of buildings that need to make a change. Something else important to remember is this is based on greenhouse gas emissions per square foot, not per hour, per full-time equivalent, employee.
Rentable or gross?
Say again?
Rentable or gross?
Use.
Isn't that what they're?
So, buildings that you, and we'll go over a couple of examples, but buildings that you think might be in good shape because they're LEED platinum, or they're new and they're very modern, things like that, they might be in real trouble based on this current setup. Buildings that you think would have trouble, an old historic building, a building, poor insulation, poor envelope, old units, they might be fine because their occupancy is so low that that plays into their square footage. There will be, there's a period that we can apply for exemptions, or adjustments, they call it. It's in the code. If you are 24-hour operation, you can apply for an adjustment. If you have a lot of data center use, you can apply for an adjustment. These buildings will not be excluded from complying with Local Law 97, but they'll probably get an adjustment on the numbers they need to meet. There is no guarantees in this, but there's talk that those adjustments will only run through 2029. So once 2030 hits, you need to figure out how to comply regardless of your use. I don't know if that's really doable, but that's the line they're taking now. So they're taking a line that for the first 5 years will be understandable. After that, it's going to be much more cut and dry. I think you'll still see some adjustments, but bottom line, our clients need to get an understanding of where they stand and start putting a plan together for how they're going to comply or make their best effort. And a lot of that's going to rely on the mechanical and electrical systems they're using in their buildings.
Just another fine point of the code is, if you're going to, first of all, very few buildings are exempt. The only exempt buildings are city-owned buildings and residential building, religious institutions, and residential buildings that have at least one rent-stabilized or rent-controlled apartment. Okay, those are your only exemptions. Landmark buildings are not exempt. So even though the energy code exempts landmark buildings, Local Law 97 does not. The other important point to realize is if you're going to request relief or an adjustment to the requirements, that the deadline for that request is July 1 of 2021. So it's around the corner, and nobody should think, it's 2024, it's years away. You gotta be thinking about it now, and this is the message we need to be sending our clients.
So we have a client, we've done their Local 84, we've compared, they need to reduce energy. What's our plan to do that? Well, what we're gonna present to them is, we've started sending out a proposal already actually, is establishing a strategic carbon reduction plan. The idea that what we would do there is we would do would be an audit, retro commissioning, MEP assessment, all wrapped into one of the building, where we would give them a report that lets them know, here's where you currently stand, here's your building as it stands, what equipment do you have, how are you currently operating it, what are your tenant schedules, what's your utility breakdown, all of that, and then start to move forward with giving them ideas for how they reduce that. So there's some clients who aren't going to have to reduce too much, there's others who are going to have to reduce and redo a lot of their building. So the options we'll be looking to give them are going to be a long list that they can see the potential options, and then we can work with them to develop a path forward that, that they're comfortable with, but would help them still meet Local Law 97. So this just, if we were going to do, say, retro commission on a building, that the intent there would be to kind of leave most of what's in place there, but optimize the systems and controls. And typically when we do retro commissioning, like 72% of the savings are found in operations and controls. The other thing, we've done some net zero buildings recently in DC, and kind of the not that we're gonna try to get any of the plants to zero, but the path of saving energy is kind of first, reduce the amount of energy you're using, reclaim as much of stuff as you can, so whether that's heat, whatever, absorb wind and solar, and then generate, try to generate the rest with green energy. So there's two ways to, well, there will be three, there's currently two, there will be three ways that our clients can also, outside of reducing their greenhouse gas, they can kind of buy down how much they're producing. So, and those three ways are, you have carbon offsets, you have the RECs, and then you have carbon trading. So the carbon offsets, these are only good from 2024 to 2029. Basically what they are is one carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of greenhouse gas emission reductions. That can be done through reforestation, through providing funds for renewable energy, methane capture, any of those. And again, that can be done anywhere. So you can invest in a wind farm in the Midwest, a solar farm in Nevada, whatever you want. Again, that is only going to be allowed from 2024 to 2029. The RECs are renewable energy credits. Those are basically 1 megawatt of energy produced and given directly to the New York City grid. So those are all local. You can use those as long as you want. The question being is how many RECs are going to be available. So for our clients who have an interest in that, we're going to recommend that they start forming these relationships earlier, so that they're kind of have that ready to go when 2024 comes. And the last is carbon trading. Basically what that means is if a building is significantly under, so say you have a building that isn't being utilized at the time, you're not using much energy, but you have a decent square footprint, you can then sell whatever you're under by to someone who's over to offset that. So as the two of you, you would then be compliant. They haven't set up the guidelines for that yet. All they've said is they will allow it. They just don't know in what form yet.
This is a form of buying your compliance, but the code limits how much you can buy. It's up to 10%.
So carbon offsets, you can buy up to 10%. You're allowable limit. With the RECs, you can buy as many RECs as you want.
You have to do that in the same state, like New York has to be done.
So carbon offsets can be anywhere. RECs have to be the New York City grid. It's not even a state thing, it's the city grid.
I mean, you're not gonna put in Manhattan windmills or some solar on Fifth Avenue, so you really only can.
It could be Yonkers, it could be the region,
New York
it's
State.
the region.
But it has to go to the New York City grid. That's the difference. Now the idea here is, again, so each form of energy has a different conversion factor to how much carbon is emitted through generating that form of energy. The idea being, with a lot of money going into the RECs, you'll see the New York City grid get greener and greener. As the New York City grid gets greener and more renewable energy is used to actually put energy into the grid, that conversion factor will go down and down so that you're generating less carbon for every kilowatt hour that you use in your building, which would allow you to use more energy and have less greenhouse gas effects. The question with that is, if we're pushing everyone to electric, and that's what we see, it's going to go down, which will, again, is going to make the case that, hey, we should all move to electric. Can the grid handle that? What happens if we start moving everyone to the grid when it's already stressed? So, some people are saying, no, go all electric, that's the way to go, because that's going to be your best source. Eventually, it's going to be an all green grid, so then you don't even have to worry about carbon emissions. But the other side of that is, are we comfortable telling our clients, hey, let's completely rely on the grid, we don't need any other sources?
So but right now, based on benchmarking, oil is the worst offender, followed by gas, followed by steam, and then electricity.
Yeah.
So, basically the benchmarking is just plugging in each of those, how much of each of those you use, and the form already has the factors that basically results in a benchmark number. But essentially, the more electricity you can use in lieu of fossil fuels, the lower your carbon emissions are going to be.
Right, but higher your bill, higher your bills.
In New York City, the cost of electricity is very high. In other cities outside New York, it's much lower. In fact, there are certain cities that are surprising, like Chicago. The cost of electricity is so low that there's a lot of all-electric heating. Okay, but as Justin mentioned, the idea is to get the grid to become greener and greener, so that there's less carbon emission in the electricity that we use by using more renewables.
Justin, I sent you the email I got kind of this about the kind of steep, but the emissions were based on different fuels.
I don't think so.
I'll forward it to you.
Okay. So then the last thing is your greenhouse gas emissions are gonna depend on a lot of things. Again, there's gonna be, the conversion factor will change based on the process being used to get those energies. Your use of energy on a building can change based on proper O&M from the building staff. Big one is gonna be your tenant activities. So if you have, all of a sudden you have a new tenant move into a space that was previously 9 to 5, and now they're running, 24-hour, operations out of there, that's gonna be a big shift. The weather plays a big part. Lately we've been having hotter summers, colder winters. So all this can play a part, and from year to year, you could have significant fluctuations in your energy usage, which is gonna convert to your greenhouse gas emissions. So we are also gonna recommend our clients get some kind of monitoring system in place. Whether that's sending us their utility bills every month and we just kind of take a look and compare and have kind of a basic spreadsheet where we can make sure nothing seems like it's jumping too far in alignment, or something extremely in-depth like Invizi, which is a real-time monitoring software that can track a ton of stuff, basically do energy audits, ongoing energy audits for you. Anything that jumps out of place, it'll generate a report, tell you where you should look, how much energy savings are probably there, things like that. Every client's gonna probably want something different, but our bottom line, our message is gonna be you need to have something in place, because you don't want to get towards the end of a year and then realize that you're not gonna be compliant. There are significant fines, which we'll get into in a second.
Yeah, you mentioned weather, but sorry. The numbers in local 197 are not adjusted for weather. There's no adjustment there. So our client can look like they're fine. They get to 2024, we have a really bad winter or a really hot summer, and now they're not fine anymore, and they have to pay fines. Okay, so it's actual usage is depending on weather. Local 197 is not. That is a shortcoming of the local law, but it is what it is. So you don't want to have your client think he's okay, when he's just below the limit. That's not good enough. He's got to have a safety factor in there, because you can't predict the weather.
And as Justin alluded to earlier, another shortcoming is the fact that it doesn't account for the type of occupancy. By right, this entire law should have been written around consumption per hour rather than absolute consumption. Because if you have a 24/7 building that's a LEED Platinum, it's still going to fail. Like the best example is one Bryant Park. We looked at the numbers, it doesn't pass. They would actually have to pay $1 million fine annually based on their current benchmarking, even though it's one of the most efficient buildings in New York City. I'm hoping they're going to issue addenda to the code between now and 2024 that addresses some of these obvious shortcomings.
So how you implement the systems in the new building by knowing that you want to be of the road, but it's not complying with that? So what system you recommend in the new building?
Get into that.
So the bottom line is to actually comply, what they need to do is submit a report by the same date, May 1st. So 2025 will be the first year. On May 1st of 2025, we'll need to have a report submitted by a design professional, third party, that states basically their building info and whether they do or do not comply. And then the Department of Buildings will take those, and from there either, I don't know if they'll issue a letter of acceptance or send out fines based on whether or not you comply. Right now, there is no standard form. This is kind of one that they helped put together. But I would envision, and this is something we're going to use with any of our clients who want to get involved soon. We'll fill this out and basically give this to them as kind of their report card. I would envision there'll be a standard form come the end of 2024, we'll see. But basically, it needs to be submitted every year. So every year by May 1st, you have to have your building's information submitted by a design professional stating what your previous year's emissions were.
Including now. Right, this year also. Or
Start-
starting 2020.
May 1st, 2025 is the deadline for the first year of submissions, which is 2024.
If you
Right now, you have local law 84, which requires annual submissions of
And
benchmarking,
it's still gonna
but
require.
it allows anyone to submit it. It doesn't require that a design professional submit it. So that means you can have the clerk in your office take the electric bills and all the bills and plug in the numbers, and hopefully he gets it right. If he doesn't get it right, there's no penalty.
And as for the variant or the request to get some leniency, that was 2021.
Yes,
So you use the benchmarking data you already have to determine whether you comply or not.
The only thing is I wouldn't rely on somebody else's benchmarking
Really
data. I would look at that as a base and then ask for the backup and plug in your numbers yourself, because you know you're gonna do it right, and then make sure that the numbers match.
The benchmarking data really just looks at all the various energy consumptions, electric, gas, steam, whatever, tabulates them with the area of the building. It has nothing to do with the systems you have in the building.
it's energy use per building. It does normalize it for weather and for building type and things like that. Like when you get your actual score, it would account for all that, but for the purposes of what you're actually inputting, it's just your energy use of all types and your building size and location. So again, there's been other
Does diesel fall in the category of oil?
Sure.
So yeah, there's number 2 and number 4. So there's been other local laws in the past. Local 87 is another one we do a lot of work on. That's retro commissioning and auditing your building every 10 years. The issue there is when we're trying to sell those services, to actually do a good job and give a value, not just check the box, but to do a good job and give a good value. For an average size building, you're probably looking at $30,000 or $40,000 plus whatever we find in our report. Anything that goes in the retro commission report, that client then has to fix before they are considered compliant. So if we find some significant things, we can't not mark them, and then if we found they have to comply. So you could be looking at, the Park Central Hotel that we're doing, they've been, for 3 years, they've been asking for exemptions basically because it's taken them so long to make fixes on the stuff we found. So you have clients not want to do that because the fine of not doing it is $5,000 a year. So you could easily not do it for 20 years and still come up on the right side of that equation. The big difference with local L97 is going to be the fine structure. So if you don't have your report in on time every year, it's 50 cents per square foot per month. So does anyone know what this building is square footage wise?
Well, let's take a,
$6 a square foot a
a million square foot office building, which is a standard office building,
$6 million.
right? That's $500,000 a month.
A month.
It's an insane amount of money.
So that's to get your report in, whether the report says you're good or bad, that's just to get it in. Once it's actually in, it's $268 times the actual tons of carbon dioxide equivalent that you're over. So from that chart we saw earlier, it's like 0.002 is the limit. If you're at 0.003, it'd be 0.003 times your square footage, because that is per square foot, and then times 268. So again, buildings that need, say, a good sized building that's 15 or 20% over is looking at $1 million a year, roughly.
Right, we looked at a few buildings, and the few buildings that we looked at that were non-compliant, the fine was about $1 a square foot a year.
Pretty close.
For the fine, at least for the 2024.
And then once it goes up to 2029, once it goes up to 2030, that jumps up by about 250%. So it'll go up to around the same building if they didn't do anything. It would probably be somewhere in that $2.5 million annual fine. If they can't afford to make the adjustments and they can't afford to pay those fines, some buildings might say, you know, I'm a 1,000,000 square foot building, it's, I have about $1 million fine, it's $1 a square foot, I'll eat that. I don't know how many clients would wanna do that, but there might be some. But there are gonna be some clients who don't wanna pay that fine because they can't afford it, but they also don't have the money to make the necessary changes. There's a second local law 96. Yeah, local law 96 is PACE financing. We've had that in the DC area for a while. It's been in Connecticut for quite a while. It'll be new to New York City. It's not approved yet, but I believe it's been passed and they're waiting to kind of formally approve it. And it's property assessed clean energy financing. So it's a group of private lenders who get together to basically form a green bank, and then they provide better rates on funding for any projects that want to have a clean energy aspect. Different groups do different things. Some groups, usually generally what it's limited on, say you get us to do an energy audit and we say, okay, the upfront cost for changing your constant volume system to a variable volume system is $500,000, but you're going to save $100,000 a year. Then, you know, they'd be happy. Loans are usually over 20 years, so they would look at it and say, okay, even though it only costs $500,000, we'll give you $2 million because that's what it's going to end up being. That's how much you'll save. So we'll give you $2 million in funds to do that measure. And
The lender on this mortgage gets the money back before even your primary lender, which is unusual. But the difference is, if you default, they can only go after the money that you haven't paid for that year. They can't take the whole mortgage back because the financing sticks with the building. So let's say you sell the building in 2 years, the financing sticks with the building and the next owner gets that tax assessment carrying through. Those are some nuances and differences. How does it affect us? Let me just mention this. Let's say we're the tenant and we're representing a tenant moving in. Tenant now has to look at the building before he rents the space. Used to be you look to see if there's asbestos. Now, before you rent the space, you want to advise our clients to take a look and see what the benchmark is to see what liability the landlord may have in terms of his investment between now and 2024. Because whatever he invests, you can be sure he's going to want to pass it through to you, whether it's a tax assessment or whether it's a capital expenditure. In most leases, it's a pass-through to the tenant. So,
In the long term.
a long, 10-year or whatever, long-term leases. So the point is that it's a new consideration if you're representing the tenant. We've been talking about the landlord's side. Landlord's going to want to pass as much of this through to the tenant. There's also a big question, how is the landlord going to oblige the tenant to make changes within his space? Let's say we just designed a gorgeous space, beautiful lighting, or maybe it's 5 years old, there's fluorescent lights still. Now the landlord goes and says, oh, you've got to change your lighting to LED at your cost. These things might have to be covered in new leases. There are open areas that haven't been addressed yet.
So, kind of just a recap, for our clients, we're going to tell them, get a design professional handling your local A4, or at least have one review it. Use that info to figure out where you stand with the current greenhouse gas emission limits. If you need to, put together a strategic carbon reduction plan, monitor it monthly so you know where you stand, and have a design professional ready to submit your local law 97 reports.
Does the local law 97 report have to be done by a design professional?
Yes.
Yes.
Has to.
So, and this gets into a little bit of what Bruce was just talking about. So that's kind of what it is, and that's what I want to get out. Now, this is where so we can have more conversation about how does this play into how we interact with our clients. So, like Bruce said, if we're representing a base building, you know, and you're going to split it into existing building and new construction. Anything with any existing building, energy modeling, and new construction, it's going to become a huge thing. So if I own an existing building and I just find out, okay, I did my carbon strategic reduction plan, and here I am, I need to make significant reductions. You know, what do you do then? So now we've identified you need to make the changes, but how do you do it? What I've been recommending to people we've talked to is, first step, you got to figure out what do you have control of. Because like Bruce said, you don't have control of the tenant space. So I would do an energy model or some kind of calculation to figure out how much energy do we have the right to control, and then start looking at what adjustments can reasonably be made there. After that, you need to look at how much rentable square feet you have and how much more kilogram of carbon dioxide equivalent you have left. Start to figure out what can you allow your tenants to use without you going over. That's probably going to need to be something that goes in leases moving forward. That's going to have to be, when you, as a base building owner, when you put a lease together, there's going to have to be some requirement for how much carbon dioxide equivalent can you as a tenant consume each year. And you're going to have fine structures in place to figure out if they do go over, how much they're going to cost you. So how much, you're going to need to pass that cost on. If you're a tenant, with these new requirements going in, I mean, we don't do a ton of tenant space energy modeling, but we're going to probably need to start doing that and recommending that because, again, as a tenant, you're going to need to know the systems that I'm putting in, how much am I going to be on the hook for, because there's likely going to be fines in your lease if you go over that. And that's something we're going to have to work on with our clients on both ends from.
So who's the owner responsible to write a guideline to the tenant what system you can use and enforce that systems?
I mean, this is, we're
Get
talking.
some kind of guideline to
The code doesn't specify how you can get to compliance.
Just says what
But
compliance.
every owner is gonna have to look at his building, assess what he's in control of, and if he's not in control of much, let's take this building, this is a B-class building, right? The only thing the landlord really gives us is heat in the winter, right? Lights, power, air conditioning is our responsibility. So the landlord can say, gee, I have very little control over the electrical consumption. I can control, we got steam in this building, right? I can replace the windows. I can control, lower the thermostat, control the steam. But beyond that, it's out of my control. What he might have to do is say, listen, all you can consume is X kilowatt hours per year or something. They might start mandating, within leases, limitations on how much power you can consume. Not so much what you can connect, but how much you can consume, because that's going to impact his benchmark.
There is also energy models are very good at comparing alternatives, because this is a certain set of building assumptions that are repeated, but they're really not very good at estimating actual consumption based out of the build. I mean, in the energy code, the JPMB, everybody was saying that their models are all 50%. Well, so what is our exposure when we say, okay, you're gonna be fine, the local 97 report, what is going on?
Well, the big question is let's say we're renovating, take 7 Hanover. If we design it today, and in 2024, it's not compliant, and they're gonna get $1 million a year fine, they may come back and say, hey, engineer, what kind of job did you do for us? We do have exposure. So we have an obligation on any new building we design and any building we renovate to take a look, we have to model it to make sure that to the best of our ability, we have to actually probably document this.
Models are accurate. Everybody knows it's not accurate.
So
It's very good at,
So there's a couple things I would
So,
say. One reason models aren't accurate is because there's a ton of assumptions put in that aren't accurate. What we're gonna need to start doing as definitely in-house and hopefully as an industry is being much more clear with our clients about what these assumptions mean. So when we say, hey, what are the occupied hours of this space gonna be? And they go, oh, it's gonna be 9 to 5. And then you find out they use it, every other weekend, and there's another, people come in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at night to use it as well. That's gonna have to be accounted for.
Day and night, that thing.
I'm also thinking that.
No, it's not only that, but when they do the model, for example, when you enable works and economizer, goes automatically, every day there's 45 weight, it assumes your compression are off. Real life is no way that, because big man, or 7 Hanover, to do that with an M+1 tower 10-degree approach, only way. M+1 tower, 10-degree approach, that's it, nobody makes it. So you immediately gonna have 15-degree approach, out the tower, you're gonna be doing economizing at 30-something degree. That's never model. If that happens in the B, it's a nightmare.
What you're saying, what I'm also thinking now is that we need to come up with some language in our base agreements with the client, sort of, just like we have language now that says, if we go after lead, we can't guarantee that you're gonna get it. We need some language here that says, we're gonna design to the best of our ability for local law 97 compliance, but we can't assure you on how the building's gonna be operated, and whether you're going to be, to identify.
Language about the energy market.
Yeah.
It's just saying that it's always.
So how do we, there's two other things we can do. We're doing one of them right now. So we just want a contract with the Smithsonian Institute down in DC. We're gonna do 2 buildings for them. We're gonna do energy models on them. Buildings that are done. The African American Museum, History and Culture Museum that opened up 2 years ago, is a pretty big deal nationally. We're gonna start energy modeling on that in about 2 weeks. What it's doing is it's called a calibrated model. So instead of predicting, you're going back and you're building a model after you know everything that's actually happened over the last year. What that will allow us, if we have some clients that we can do that for, if they have an existing space, if they want to go to a new space, we can do a calibrated model of previous systems that, or even if we design a space for a tenant and we think, hey, this is a pretty good design, this would probably work in a lot of offices, we can ask them afterwards, even if we want to do it at our own cost. Hey, can we do a calibrated model so we can get some real data on what those systems, how they're performing, so we have a better idea of moving forward.
Yeah, like that would be perfect for another person. Because they have a chiller plant right now, we're going to work with it, which is going to be worse. And that you could do because you could take the chiller plant facility with all the numbers that they have now, and then extrapolate to the new system, which is going to work with the capital towers, and see if they're going to do. That's what they should. That's
Perfect. So the other option we have that we had talked about in a previous meeting that there could be some pros and cons to it, but that I think is worthwhile considering is that the slide I had about that Envizi software. If we can get more clients to be interested in that, what we can do is sell it as a service where, hey, we're going to monitor, we're going to use this to monitor your systems. If we see anything out of whack, we'll let you know right away. Kind of sell it as a, they call it ongoing commissioning. So every month we would send them, like my office would do that. We would look at the reports for Envizi and send them updates saying, hey, we looked at everything this month, you look great, or hey, it looks like there's some kind of issue going on with Air Handler 4. We think from the data, we think it could be this. Why don't you have your facilities guy go check it out? If he can't figure it out, we can come on at an hourly rate. With that real-time software, we'd be able to then have very good examples of the systems we're designing and how they're performing. And then we could use that as a sales tactic with new clients saying, we're not guessing at how this, this VAV system or this, VRF system is going to perform. We know based on other buildings in the city of similar size, similar base building systems, we put one in, this is what it's doing right now. So it's a way for us to it would be a way for us to keep in touch with that current client instead of designing the building and walking away. We'd be sending local EMO emails every month to them, reminding them how it's performing. We'd also be the first ones to know if they have any issues. So that, again, I think when you have an opportunity to tell a client you have an issue, and by the way, we have a solution for you, before they even know they have an issue, is a really good way to get in there and do more work without having to bid against anybody else. But also, it could be a tactic that we can use to see how we're actually performing, take that to other clients, and have good confidence that what we're going to put in and what we're designing is going to operate.
Remember, in 2024, after we submit the first benchmarking, May of 2025, it's 12 months till the next submission. If we don't monitor their consumption monthly, you might get till November or December of that year, and then look at the benchmark and find out, oh, shoot, something went wrong. The machine wasn't working right, we spent 50% more electricity or gas, and it's too late, there's nothing you can do. And if you're gonna submit an honest benchmark, which again, design professionals have to, they might be up for a penalty, and there's no way out of it.
Justin, this Envizi just hooks into the BMS system or it involves additional points and.
As long as you have any kind of BAS in there, it sits on top of it.
Okay.
It's not cheap, but at the same time, particularly for new construction, it's not doesn't become a huge line item either. So basically, as Looker would be the one who holds the Envizi license, we would be the ones who get all the data. The client would never see it. They would only see the reports we want to generate and send them. So instead of selling them really on Invizi, we'd be selling them on a real-time monitoring system or a monthly service, and then we would use Invizi to do that.
It's not the billing company who monitors the consumption of the electricity, has this information, if there is a deviation between the usage from month to month, and they can alert the owners.
We would be the ones alerting them, yeah.
But we have a system that we can monitor the electricity for all the tenants in the building.
If Invizi would give us all that information.
Well, we're getting that anyway with sub-meter in New York
Yeah.
City anyhow. So yeah, we have the electrical consumption.
And even if we don't do Invizi, like I said, we can, as part of this, we can be asking for this information, that we can do a more kind of rudimentary monthly monitoring, and we still have that data. It wouldn't be as cleanly broke out, but we would still have, we could create some stuff in-house of how different spaces are performing, and what systems are in there, things like that. The other thing I think we need to be cautious of as well, something right when the merger happened and we started doing some work, my office started doing some work in New York. Two of the first projects we did, we found that one over at NAACP, that space, they weren't getting proper radiation, heat to the radiators from the base building. People were in there working with gloves on. We basically went in and wrote a third-party report that they could then take to the landlord saying, hey, we've had this checked out. We don't think your treatment is fair. The next step would be legal action. And then at Polio, I worked with you on that. And when we tried to do the balancing here, whatever, we found out that the base building outside air duct for for 2 floors was closed. It had been. It was under hard ceiling. It had been closed for 15 years. They'd only been providing 50% of the base building outside air that they were supposed to provide. That's what landlords are doing now with no incentive except saving a little bit of energy. Now that you have these huge fines tacked on the top of that, I think we need to watch out for our tenants and when we're designing systems, be aware that the first step some of these buildings might make is to close down outside air, reduce how much heat they're providing to try to comply. So that's something
No, in fact, yeah, it's one of the major things in water commissioning is building and legal up.
The building engineer is going to be judged on
They do it now.
benchmark.
That's what I mean, that's without,
Yeah.
not that much incentive, there's a little bit.
How do you,
There's a much bigger one though.
how do you benchmark an apartment building? Where all the tenants are paying their own electric bill and gas bill?
It's aggregate, so what they do is they can still meter all of that, so usually what
But
they
it may
do,
not be, how do you get that number when you have 100 tenants, 100 meters?
usually what happens is there's one meter that feeds there's
There
one
isn't always
meter
that way.
that covers all of the residential
It's
units
only in
and
the
one for
sub-meter.
base building.
As long as it's sub-meter.
This direct meter is not. The answer is Con Ed has that information. They have to get it. But the question is, how does the apartment building submit their benchmarking
Right, I
report?
don't get, yeah.
And the answer, I think, is they have to get the data from every single occupant.
Wow.
Oh, we was just suggesting to put a sub-meter.
Some buildings don't have a master meter.
No,
Right.
most buildings
Or
don't.
the electric. We don't know what Con Ed does in the street.
So should we expect, let's say, an update
There's also,
to
by the way, there's also another question about, let's say you got a mixed-use building, you got retail on the ground floor, you got some healthcare, you've got some, some office building, and then a residential on top. What we've been told is that you blend the numbers that are on that table.
It'll be a weighted average.
Yeah, but again, it's not been defined.
Is it weighted by type of use?
Well, so that previous slide with the chart about
Based on
building
square
type and then how. So say you have 50,000 square feet of residential, or like hotel, you use that R1, 50,000 feet at that number, and then if you have 10,000 feet of retail on the bottom, you use 10,000
What
of
happens
that.
if you have a process, like it's a bakery or something that makes tomato sauce, or whatever it is, it uses a lot of heat.
Well, I don't even know, are factories not included?
Yeah.
The number is much higher. Hospitals, for instance, they allow you much more consumption. They know it's 24/7. They've allowed in the number already the fact that it's a hospital. So again, factories.
And again, there is gonna be adjustments that can be made. In my opinion, what I think you're gonna see from the DOB is making sure clients are making an honest effort. What have you done? So if you just go in and say, I don't think I should have to comply, I don't think you're gonna get a lot of luck there. But if you go in and say, hey, I've had a consultant come in and look at this, we have a plan in place, but here's what that plan tells me. I'm gonna have to reduce energy by 70%, and I think you'll be able to find a way, that they'll give you some leeway, okay, we see you're trying, let's see you get down 40% at this level and we'll let you slide. But we don't know that, so I mean, you have to follow it.
Justin, a few people have to leave in
Okay.
5 minutes, so we should at least cover everything in one.
So, this is just a little bit about, one general thing I want to say is, we've talked to we've talked to architects, we've talked to building owners, we've talked to tenant representatives. One common thing we hear is, how are we gonna do this? Or we've never had to do anything like that in the past. And my answer to that would be, yes, we never have. Never been any law like this in the past, so thinking that you're gonna get compliant with just doing what we've always done, is probably the wrong mindset. I think what you're gonna need to see is some more innovative, creative ways to get there. In general, that's my general thought on this. These are just an example of a building we see a lot in DC, where this is a hydrophyto remediation wall. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but basically, it's a green wall. So they cut open the return shaft of the building, they put a mesh grid over top of it, they plant it. There's no soil, it's just plants that don't need soil. The root structure grows around the grid. What happens is the return air pulls air through there, the plant roots feed off of the nutrients in the air, what they call it nutrients, we would call it pollutants, and then it goes up the return shaft to get measured at the top there's an air quality measuring station. There's another one on the rooftop that looks at the outside air of DC. Anytime the return air that is filtered through the plants is better quality than the outside air, they don't have to comply with those actually in the code guidelines, they can just use return air. So you're talking about in the winters and summers, being able to just run, return air at 75 degrees or whatever it is to cool and heat that instead of the humid 100-degree air or very dry 20-degree air.
The big thing here is also, some of the things that we've taken for granted for the last 30 years are out the window. You're thinking central system, rooftop cooling tower, condensing water, and then your air conditioning. You might need to be going to VRF now because it's going to be more efficient. It's going to use less kW per ton.
And the other thing is, we're talking about what we can do from our design standpoint. There's going to be probably a lot of buildings that need a lot of help on the envelope and things of that nature. So, talking to the architects you have good relationships with, letting them know that we're on top of this, and Cindy Duffy I've already talked to Jessica over there, and she's invited me to go sit at a couple of kind of meetings with clients with her because she wants to be able to provide that full service solution to them and let them know this isn't an architect issue, this isn't an MEP issue, it's not a sustainability consultant issue. It's a building issue. It's going to take a team for a lot of facilities to get there. But if we can get in with some architects early, let them know we can be a partner on this, I think we'll have better luck than waiting until everyone's already found some teams and then trying to play catch up.
And you can refer these types of issues to Justin. Justin, with our energy group, is there to assist any client on any project. It's not as if you have to take it on yourself necessarily.
Yeah. So this last two slides, just some examples of buildings. So I did this presentation for HOK. So this is a building they
Their offices.
their offices in here, yeah. And you can see that, but energy score of 85, which is really good. In 2024, they would be fine. They're under the limit. Come 2030, they'd be looking at like $286,000 in annual fines.
As good as their benchmark is, it's not good enough for 2030. When we design, we have to be thinking about 2035, and they haven't even established those standards yet.
Because half the time, we're not just battling the footprint of the building, what space you have, the owner's economics, and get it in as cheap as possible, et cetera, You can always do better if you spend more money up
The
front.
people who wrote this were not engineers, and they didn't listen to the engineer's advice. Dave was on the codes committee. This was the mayor wanting to make his mark.
So that financial equation is going to change. And the same thing when we do energy audits or retro commissioning. There's measures we recommend that they don't pencil out. The payback's too long. You're going to see that shift though, because now instead of just upfront costs and then energy savings gives you kind of your ROI, there's another component to this equation now, which is $1 million a year in fines.
So your incentive is to not pay money now. Instead of getting rebates, it's to not have to pay a fine is your incentive.
I mean, it becomes part of these.
But the net result is a carbon reduction. You know, that's the motivation to get the landlords to do it, but it is gonna save carbon.
Just to back us up, besides just having local law and what they wrote down, should we expect soon, next year, 2 years, an updated energy code that reflects some of this implementation to provide them with code sections and say this is required
You
now?
know, the big question is, if, let's say we design a building to the energy code, will it comply with 97? We haven't tested that yet, we should. It may not, because if you can build it to the energy code, but if you're using a lot of fossil fuel.
Well, and also, for instance, you said landmark buildings, which are exempt from the energy code, are not exempt from this. So that's what I mean, is there gonna be any changes to the energy code that'll hopefully give us something to say, listen, spend the money, you have to do it, rather than just saying, well, in 10 years, you're gonna get fined for this, and they say, I'll deal with it in 10 years.
I suspect we'll be seeing changes in the energy code, we'll be seeing changes in 97. You know, as they sit down with the knowledgeable people, the engineers, and the quirks of the code are raised, they'll realize they have to make adjustments.
How does this program compare to the DC and the, you know, things in Dallas? So,
Dallas isn't, well, Dallas is actually about to end. They had theirs from 1990 to 2020, their greenhouse gas reduction program. I anticipate they'll have a new one coming out. DC's is gonna be the bottom 50% of energy, so we do the benchmark as well. The bottom 50% of buildings have to have a 20% improvement, 20% reduction in energy usage. And they'll do that every couple years. So then, if you don't make enough improvement, you're gonna end up on that list multiple times. So the goal for everyone's gonna be to try to be over that 50% mark. So you're not having,
everybody can't be over the 50% mark.
no 50% can be.
Right.
So that's, again, even if you're not in DC, even if you're not in non-compliance, you're gonna be making changes because you don't wanna get passed up. So the idea is to just continually drive that up. So and then the last one, this kind of points back to our local law 84 benchmarking and the data that's in there. So this was another building HK was familiar with, but as their benchmarking data stands currently, they would be looking at like $166 million in annual fines based on that. There's no way that's right, it's clearly wrong, but that's what's happening when someone, you know, when the office manager.
You give it to the clerk.
Yeah, the clerk's inputting the benchmarking data. So that's why, again, we can get a data on a lot of these buildings, but all that data has to take with a grain of salt because we don't know what's been put in it, if that's right or wrong. So that's great, that gives us a starting point, but our bottom line is we want to be doing local 84 for all our clients. And if not, and they're interested in this, we want to get the actual utility bills to go back and actually redo it. So that's the end of the presentation. Do you guys have any questions about how you think this is going to impact you guys, clients? How, you know, what role can I play in helping you?
Main thing is, you know, we owe it to our clients to understand this code and to make them aware that it exists and to, when we're designing, keep it in mind in terms of our design concepts. Some of the old design concepts have to be reconsidered.
We talked to an architect recently on a job we did, and we found out the client was very swayed by the presentation of another MEP group who had focused the majority of their presentation on local law 97. Again, it's from everyone we've talked to, like we talked to Renato, HOK, Mitsui Duffy's, some other clients. One thing that is pretty common is that most people they've heard about this, but they don't really understand it and how it's going to impact them, which is causing some panic and some anxiety. So what they're looking for is a team that can kind of help ease that worry and kind of give them some feeling that, hey, we have someone to lean on, we have someone to help kind of get us through this.
And what's in it for us? Over the next 5 years, billions of dollars are going to have to be spent in New York City for compliance.
They've estimated $20 billion.
Somebody's going to have to design that work. Could be us.
And I think it's a way to, like I said, it's a way to differentiate yourself. So we can go in there and strongly represent do we not only understand this, but we have a plan for how to get them compliant with our designs. I think that's going to go a long way.
we also need to look at 2021, being more seriously, because if they're way out of whack, we need to help them get the variances or the reliefs that they have to file for.
So what you could do is, any clients you have right now, you can say, you know what, send me the benchmarking for your portfolio. I'll have my energy people take a quick look and see whether, how it's gonna impact you for 2024. You know, and it costs us next to nothing. The data is, you know, it's published, it's online. Just a matter of interpreting it and making sure you're looking at comparing it to the right benchmark in the standard. It can turn into a study, it can turn into a design effort. And people who are on the fence with, you know, who would nurse along a boiler, now they get cheap financing and they get the incentive of not having you know, a fine, might decide it's time to change that boiler.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Well, interesting conversation. I think you missed a few minutes of it at one point.